Zero bonus, deal with it. Victor's words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The entire executive board sat frozen, waiting for my reaction. I could feel their eyes on me, some sympathetic, others gleeful. 23 years of 70-hour weeks, of sacrificed weekends, of building this company from a regional player to an international powerhouse. And this was my thank you. I straightened my spine, looked Victor directly in the eye, and said 3 words that would change everything. Pull Section 3. The color drained from Victor's face. The CFO's fingers stopped mid-tap on his laptop. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What are you talking about?" Victor stammered, but I could see the panic creeping into his expression. That's when I knew he had no idea what was buried in my original employment contract. They'd forgotten. In all their restructuring, their new leadership, their cost-cutting measures, they'd forgotten about the golden parachute I'd negotiated back when this company desperately needed someone with my expertise. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where the underdogs don't just fight back. They win with strategy, patience, and ironclad contracts. I'm sharing real stories about workplace justice, about standing up when standing up costs something, and about the sweet moment when preparation meets opportunity. If you're tired of watching good people get steamrolled by corporate games, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and help us reach 8,000 subscribers. We're building a community of people who believe that integrity and intelligence can triumph over arrogance and greed. My name is Rose Callahan, and until that fateful board meeting, I was Executive Vice President of Global Operations at Apex Solutions. I didn't grow up in boardrooms or country clubs. My parents ran a small hardware store in Ohio, working side by side for 40 years. They taught me that a handshake meant something, that you honor your commitments, and that you never forget where you came from. Those lessons made me the kind of leader who remembered every warehouse worker's name, who understood that quarterly profits depended on people, not just spreadsheets. The story of how I ended up with a $120 million exit package starts 23 years earlier, in a cramped office in downtown Chicago. I was 32 years old, with an MBA from a state school, 2 kids under 5 at home, and a husband who'd just taken a risk on his own startup. When Apex Solutions approached me, they weren't the corporate giant they are today. They were struggling, hemorrhaging clients, and desperate for someone who could rebuild their operations from the ground up. I remember sitting across from the founder, Thomas Whitmore, in his modest office that smelled like old coffee and desperation. "We can't afford top-tier talent," he'd admitted, running his hands through his thinning hair. "But I can see something in you, Rose. You understand systems. You understand people. If you can turn this division around, I'll make sure you're taken care of." That conversation led to 3 days of negotiations. My husband, Jack, sat with me at our kitchen table every night, going over the numbers. "They're offering equity and a performance-based salary," I told him, spreading the papers across the table we'd bought at a garage sale. "But I want protection. If they ever sell, if they ever go public, if this thing becomes what Thomas thinks it can become, I want to make sure our kids' futures are secure." Jack, bless him, had a friend from college who'd become a contract attorney. We called in a favor, and together we crafted an employment agreement that seemed almost absurd at the time. Section 3 outlined my exit package. If the company ever reached a valuation above $5 billion, and if I was terminated without cause or constructively dismissed, I would receive 2% of the company's current market value, with a floor of $50 million and a ceiling of $200 million. Thomas had laughed when he read it. "Rose, we can barely make payroll. If we hit $5 billion, you deserve every penny." He signed it without running it past legal. It was just him, me, and a dream that seemed impossible. For the first 5 years, I worked like someone possessed. I restructured the entire supply chain, cutting costs by 30% while improving delivery times. I rebuilt relationships with clients we'd nearly lost. I hired smart people and gave them room to grow. I implemented systems that scaled. I traveled constantly, spending weeks away from Jack and the kids, calling home every night to hear about soccer practices and science projects. The company started to grow, slowly at first, then faster. We landed a major government contract in year 6. We acquired a competitor in year 8. We expanded internationally in year 10. Thomas remained CEO through it all, and he never forgot the people who'd bet on him when betting was dangerous. He promoted me to senior vice president, then to executive vice president. My salary grew, my equity vested. That old contract, the one we drafted at my kitchen table, sat in a file somewhere, gradually forgotten by everyone except me. Year 15 brought our IPO. I stood on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with Thomas, watching our ticker symbol flash across the screens. We'd done it. The company was valued at $8.2 billion. My equity alone was worth tens of millions. But more importantly, I'd built something I was proud of. Our operations division employed over 15,000 people. We had profit-sharing programs. We had one of the best benefits packages in the industry. I knew the names of managers in every region. I attended warehouse openings and distribution center anniversaries. Jack and I paid off our mortgage. We put money away for our kids' college funds, then their wedding funds, then their future kids' funds. We donated to my parents' church and to the local food bank. We lived well, but not extravagantly. I still drove a Lexus, not a Bentley. We still lived in the same neighborhood, just in a bigger house. The money was nice, but the work itself mattered more. Then came year 20. Thomas announced his retirement. He'd earned it. The man was 73 and wanted to spend time with his grandchildren. The board conducted a national search for his replacement. I applied, naturally. I'd been running operations for 2 decades. I knew every aspect of the business. I had the respect of employees at every level. They chose Victor Ashford instead. Victor came from a massive consulting firm, the kind that charges $5,000 an hour to tell you what you already know. He had an Ivy League pedigree, a collection of expensive suits, and absolutely zero operational experience. But he had connections. He had the kind of polish that dazzled board members who cared more about quarterly earnings reports than sustainable growth. I swallowed my disappointment and told myself to be professional. I scheduled a meeting with Victor before his official start date. We met at the corporate office, in what would become his corner suite. "I'm looking forward to working together," I told him, extending my hand. "I've prepared briefing documents on all our current initiatives, and I'm happy to answer any questions." Victor barely glanced at the materials I'd spent weeks preparing. "Rose, I appreciate your tenure here," he said, managing to make tenure sound like a polite word for obsolescence. "But I'm bringing in my own team. Fresh perspectives, I'm sure you understand." Fresh perspectives turned out to mean a parade of expensive consultants who interviewed long-time employees with barely concealed condescension. They produced glossy presentations recommending streamlining and right-sizing and other euphemisms for mass layoffs. They suggested we close our profit-sharing program to optimize shareholder value. They wanted to offshore our customer service division, never mind that our customer satisfaction scores were industry-leading. I pushed back in every meeting. I presented data. I showed them the cost of turnover, the value of institutional knowledge, the revenue generated by loyal customers who appreciated talking to knowledgeable representatives. Sometimes I won small battles. Often I didn't. Victor would smile his practice smile and say things like, "I hear your concerns, Rose, but the market demands efficiency." The culture started to shift. Senior managers who'd been with the company for decades began leaving, taking early retirement packages or jumping to competitors. The warehouse workers and customer service reps and logistics coordinators started to feel like widgets on a spreadsheet rather than valued team members. Morale plummeted. I spent more and more time on the road, visiting our facilities, trying to reassure people that their contributions mattered, even as I watched decisions being made that proved otherwise. Jack noticed the toll it was taking. "You're not sleeping," he said one night, finding me at the kitchen table at 2 a.m, reviewing another round of proposed cuts. Our kids were grown now, Emily working as a teacher in Portland and Michael in medical school in Boston. It was just the 2 of us in our too-big house, and Jack could read me better than anyone. "Maybe it's time to consider retirement. We don't need the money. You've proven everything you need to prove." "It's not about me," I told him, which was both true and not true. "There are people depending on these jobs, families. If I leave, who's going to fight for them? But deep down, I knew I was also fighting for something else. For recognition, for validation, for the chance to prove that my way, the patient way, the human way, could still succeed in modern corporate America. Year 22 brought what Victor called a comprehensive restructuring initiative. That was corporate speak for gutting everything that made Apex Solutions worth working for. The profit-sharing program was eliminated. The generous health benefits were replaced with high-deductible plans. 3 of our domestic distribution centers were closed, with operations moved to facilities overseas where labor was cheaper and regulations were looser. Over 2,000 people lost their jobs. I fought every step. I presented alternative proposals. I showed how short-term cost savings would lead to long-term revenue loss. I reminded the board of our founding principles, of the commitments Thomas had made. Some board members listened. Others had been brought in by Victor, and they parroted his efficiency gospel like true believers. The votes went his way more often than mine. The worst part was watching the human cost. I got emails from employees who'd been with us for 15, 20 years, suddenly finding themselves without jobs in towns where Apex had been the primary employer. I wrote recommendation letters. I made calls to contacts at other companies. I contributed to fundraisers for families hit hardest, but I couldn't save everyone, and the guilt ate at me. Then came year 23, and the bonus situation. For 2 decades, the executive team had received annual performance bonuses based on a formula tied to revenue growth, profit margins, and employee satisfaction scores. My bonuses had been substantial, typically ranging from $1 to $3 million. I donated significant portions to charity and invested the rest conservatively. The bonus structure had been part of my compensation package, approved by the board, included in every annual review. 3 weeks before bonuses were typically announced, Victor called a special executive meeting. The entire C-suite attended. The CFO, the Chief Marketing Officer, the General Counsel, the Chief Technology Officer, and me. We gathered in the main conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It was a gray February morning, the kind where the sky and water blur into one endless stretch of cold. "I'll get right to the point," Victor began, standing at the head of the table like a general addressing his troops. "The board and I have decided to restructure executive compensation going forward. We're eliminating the traditional bonus system in favor of long-term equity incentives that better align leadership interests with shareholder value." The CFO, a nervous man named Andrew Keller, who'd been hired by Victor 6 months earlier, pulled up a presentation. It showed complex charts about restricted stock units and performance-based vesting schedules. The summary was simple: no cash bonuses this year or any year going forward. Instead, we'd receive stock that would vest over 4 years, assuming we met increasingly aggressive performance targets. "This is effective immediately?" asked the CMO, a sharp woman named Diane Torres who'd been around almost as long as I had. "What about this year's bonuses? We're 3 weeks from the traditional distribution date." "The decision applies to all compensation going forward," Victor said smoothly. "That includes any bonuses that haven't yet been paid." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Victor, we've already completed the performance year. The metrics were established 12 months ago. We structured our work, our teams, and our priorities around meeting those targets. You can't retroactively change the terms." "I can, and I have," Victor replied, his smile never wavering. "The board has full authority over executive compensation. This isn't personal, Rose. It's about positioning the company for the next phase of growth." "It's absolutely personal when you're taking money that people earned under an existing agreement," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger building inside me. "This isn't some theoretical future bonus. This is compensation for work already performed under a specific contract." Victor's smile finally faded. "Are you questioning my authority?" "I'm questioning your ethics." The room went silent. Andrew, the CFO, suddenly became very interested in his laptop screen. Diane shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The general counsel, a man named Philip Stone, who'd been Thomas's right hand for years before grudgingly staying on under Victor, cleared his throat. Rose makes a valid point, Philip said carefully. There could be legal implications to changing bonus terms retroactively. We might want to consider. The decision is made, Victor interrupted. If anyone is uncomfortable with the new compensation structure, they're welcome to explore other opportunities. That's when I understood. This wasn't about restructuring compensation or aligning incentives. This was Victor's way of pushing out the old guard, the people who remembered what the company used to stand for. He wanted us to quit, to leave quietly, to be replaced by people who owed their careers to him. I thought about Thomas, about that first meeting in his modest office. I thought about the thousands of employees who'd lost their jobs while Victor and his consulting buddies collected massive fees. I thought about my parents, about handshakes meaning something, about honoring commitments. And I thought about Section 3 of my original employment contract, sitting in a file in the legal department, patiently waiting for exactly this moment. I see, I said quietly. So to be clear, you're unilaterally canceling performance bonuses that were part of our agreed-upon compensation, despite the fact that we met or exceeded all established metrics. And if we don't like it, we can leave. I wouldn't phrase it quite so dramatically, Victor said, his smile returning. But yes, essentially, this is a new era for Apex Solutions. Those who want to be part of it will adapt. I stood up, gathering my notebook and pen. Then, I'd like to request a formal meeting with the full board of directors. Victor's expression flickered, just for a moment. That won't be necessary. I speak for the board on compensation matters. Actually, you don't, Philip the general counsel interjected, looking uncomfortable but firm. Any executive has the right to address the full board on matters of contract dispute. It's in our bylaws. Fine, Victor said, waving his hand dismissively. Schedule it, Philip, though I assure you, Rose, the outcome won't change. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I spent those 14 days preparing. I pulled my original employment contract from my personal files, the one Jack and I had negotiated at our kitchen table all those years ago. I read through Section 3 for the 100th time, making sure I understood every word, every implication. Then I called my attorney, not the company's legal team, but my own personal lawyer, a sharp woman named Hannah Ortiz who specialized in executive compensation disputes. Hannah read through my contract with increasing disbelief. Rose, do you understand what you have here? If they've created conditions that constitute constructive dismissal and given the company's current market valuation. She pulled up the latest stock price on her computer. Apex is currently valued at approximately $6.2 billion. 2% of that is $124 million, I finished. I know. Have they honored this contract over the years? Your salary, your bonuses, your equity grants. Everything except this recent bonus cancellation. And that bonus, combined with the restructuring, the hostile work environment, the elimination of programs you built, any reasonable interpretation would call this constructive dismissal. They're fundamentally changing the terms of your employment to force you out. Hannah leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at her lips. When's this board meeting? Next Tuesday. Don't mention the exit package yet. Let them commit. Let them make it absolutely clear they're changing your compensation structure without your agreement. Record everything. Take notes. Then, when the moment is right, you reference Section 3 and watch their world explode. I spent the weekend with Jack, walking along the lakeshore despite the bitter cold. Are you sure about this? He asked, his arm around my shoulders. This could get ugly. Lawsuits, public battles, media attention. They're counting on me being afraid of ugly, I said. They're counting on me taking whatever severance they offer and disappearing quietly. But if I do that, if I let them erase everything we built without consequences, what message does that send? That loyalty means nothing. That commitments are just words on paper until someone powerful decides otherwise. Jack stopped walking and turned to face me. After 35 years of marriage, he still had the same steady gaze that had made me fall in love with him in college. Then you fight, but you fight smart. You fight with that contract and the law on your side, not with emotion. And when it's over, win or lose, we take that trip to New Zealand we've been planning for 5 years. Deal, I said, and we shook on it right there on the frozen beach. The board meeting convened at 9 a.m. in the main conference room. All 12 board members attended, sitting along one side of the massive oak table. Victor sat at the center, flanked by his allies. I sat alone on the opposite side, with Philip, the general counsel, positioned awkwardly at the end, technically neutral but clearly uncomfortable. I dressed carefully that morning, a navy suit, pearls my mother had given me, comfortable heels. I wanted to look professional but not aggressive, confident but not combative. I had a single folder in front of me containing my original contract, my performance reviews for the past 5 years, and a summary of the bonus metrics we'd exceeded. "Let's begin," said Harrison Welsh, the board chairman, a silver-haired man in his 70s who joined the board just 3 years earlier. "Rose, you requested this meeting to discuss the recent changes to executive compensation. You have 30 minutes. I opened my folder and slid copies of the performance metrics across the table. For the past 23 years, my compensation has included an annual performance bonus tied to specific, measurable objectives. These objectives are set at the beginning of each fiscal year, approved by the board, and incorporated into employment agreements. This year, my division exceeded revenue targets by 18%, maintained the highest customer satisfaction scores in company history, and successfully integrated 2 major acquisitions. I paused, making eye contact with each board member. Some met my gaze, others studied the papers in front of them. Under the established formula, my bonus for this year would be approximately $2.8 million. 3 weeks before the traditional distribution date, that bonus was unilaterally canceled. Not reduced, not modified. Canceled entirely, with no prior notice and no opportunity for discussion. "The board has authority to modify compensation structures," Victor interjected smoothly. "Surely you're not suggesting we need employee permission to make executive decisions?" "I'm suggesting that honoring contracts matters," I replied evenly. "I'm suggesting that retroactively changing compensation for work already performed isn't a modification, it's a breach of agreement." One of the board members, a woman named Claire Donovan who ran a major nonprofit, leaned forward. "Rose, I appreciate your perspective, but the company is evolving. The market demands different incentive structures. Surely you understand the need for flexibility." "I understand that words have meanings," I said. "When we say performance bonus based on metrics, that's not flexible. That's specific. When those metrics are exceeded and the bonus is eliminated anyway, that's not evolution. That's a fundamental change in the employment relationship." Harrison, the chairman, cleared his throat. "What exactly are you requesting, Rose?" This was the moment. I could ask for my bonus, fight that battle, maybe win a few $1 million and permanent enemy status. Or I could let them commit fully, let them show their hand, and then reveal the trump card they'd forgotten existed. "I'm requesting that the board honor the compensation agreement that's been in place for 2 decades, I said. "Pay the earned bonuses under the existing formula, and if you want to change the structure going forward, do it transparently with proper notice and negotiation." Victor laughed, actually laughed. "Rose, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. This isn't a negotiation. The decision has been made. The bonus structure is eliminated. Going forward, you'll receive equity-based compensation like the rest of the executive team. If you're unwilling to accept those terms, then perhaps it's time to discuss your transition out of the company." Several board members shifted uncomfortably at Victor's bluntness, but no one contradicted him. I could see the calculation in their eyes. I was expensive, old guard, resistant to change. Victor was the future, the golden boy who'd convinced them he could take the company to new heights. If it came down to choosing between us, they'd already made their choice. "So to be absolutely clear," I said slowly, "you're stating that my employment will be terminated if I don't accept this new compensation structure that eliminates bonuses I've already earned." "I'm saying that executives who can't align with the company's new direction should explore other opportunities," Victor replied. "We're happy to offer you a generous severance package, 6 months' salary, continuation of benefits, and a glowing recommendation. You've had a good run, Rose. There's no shame in retiring." 6-month salary. For 23 years of building this company from nothing into a $6 billion enterprise. For the nights I'd spent away from my family, the weekends I'd worked, the thousands of employees whose careers I'd championed. 6-month salary and a handshake. Hannah Ortiz's voice echoed in my mind. Let them commit. Let them make it absolutely clear. And if I don't accept that severance, I asked. Then we'll have HR work with you on a performance improvement plan, Victor said, his smile turning sharp. I'm sure we can find some metrics you haven't quite met. There it was, the threat delivered with a smile. Shape up, ship out, or we'll manufacture reasons to fire you for cause. It was textbook constructive dismissal, and he was doing it in front of the entire board. Philip, the general counsel, cleared his throat. Victor, perhaps we should discuss this privately before. Before what, Philip? Victor turned to him. Before we acknowledge what everyone in this room already knows. Rose is a relic of a different era. She's done good work, but the company has outgrown her approach. It's time for a mutual parting of ways. I felt remarkably calm. All the anger, all the frustration of the past 3 years seemed to crystallize into a single point of absolute clarity. I reached into my folder and pulled out my original employment contract, the one with Thomas Whitmore's signature still visible on the last page. Before we discuss my transition, I said quietly, I'd like the board to review Section 3 of my original employment agreement. Victor's smile didn't waver. Rose, that contract is over 20 years old. It's been superseded by numerous amendments and updates. Actually, it hasn't, Philip said, his voice stronger now. He'd pulled up something on his laptop, his face pale. The original contract specifically states that Section 3 can only be modified with written consent from both parties. I'm looking at our files now, and I don't see any such modification. What's Section 3? Harrison, the chairman, asked, looking between us. I slid copies of the relevant pages across the table. Section 3 outlines my exit package in the event of termination without cause or constructive dismissal. Given that the company has now reached a valuation above the threshold specified in the contract, and given that I'm being told to accept fundamentally different employment terms or leave, that section becomes relevant. Victor picked up the pages, his smile finally fading as he read. The color drained from his face. This can't be enforceable. The numbers here are insane. What numbers? Harrison demanded, grabbing his own copy. 2% of current market value, with a floor of $50 million and a ceiling of $200 million, Philip read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Triggered by termination without cause or constructive dismissal, defined as material changes to compensation, authority, or reporting structure without mutual agreement. The conference room erupted. Board members talking over each other, demanding explanations, shuffling through papers. Victor's face had gone from pale to red, his carefully maintained composure cracking. Who approved this? Harrison shouted. Who signed off on a 2% exit package? Thomas Whitmore, the founder, Philip said. It was negotiated as part of Rose's original hiring package when the company was valued at approximately $40 million. At that time, 2% would have been $800,000. The escalation clause was considered unlikely to ever matter. Well, it matters now, Victor slammed his hand on the table. At current valuation, 2% is, he pulled out his phone, jabbing at the calculator. $124 million, we're not paying that, it's unconscionable. We'll fight it in court. On what grounds? I asked calmly. The contract is clear. The terms are unambiguous, and in the past 45 minutes, you've created a perfect record of constructive dismissal. You've unilaterally eliminated my bonus, threatened my employment if I don't accept new terms, and publicly stated that you want me to leave the company. Claire Donovan, the nonprofit leader, looked at me with something like respect. This was planned. You came here knowing Victor would overplay his hand. I came here hoping the board would honor its commitments, I corrected. But yes, I was prepared for the alternative. Harrison turned to Victor, his expression furious. Did you know about this clause? Did anyone review her original contract before you started this compensation restructuring? It's a 23-year-old document, Victor protested. No one could have anticipated we need to challenge this. Get our litigation team involved. There has to be a way out. There isn't, Philip said quietly. I've been with this company for 18 years. I've reviewed this contract before. It's airtight. Rose's attorney at the time knew exactly what they were doing. Every amendment we've made to her employment terms over the years specifically excluded Section 3 from modification. Thomas insisted on it. He said Rose earned her protection. One of the newer board members, a hedge fund manager named Todd Brennan, leaned back in his chair with a low whistle. So let me understand this. If we fire Rose or if we force her out by changing her job fundamentally, we owe her $124 million. But if she stays, we have to reverse the bonus decision and restore her compensation. Essentially, yes, Philip confirmed. What if she just quits? Todd asked. Voluntary resignation wouldn't trigger the clause, right? Right, I said. If I voluntarily resign without cause, I forfeit the exit package. I receive only my vested equity and standard retirement benefits. Victor latched onto this like a drowning man grabbing a rope. So we maintain the compensation changes. Rose can either accept them or quit, her choice. That's still constructive dismissal, Philip said. Any competent employment attorney would argue that forcing a senior executive to accept a 70% pay cut or resign is functionally the same as termination. No court would see that as voluntary resignation. The board meeting devolved into chaos. Harrison called for a recess. The board members huddled in small groups, some making frantic phone calls to their own attorneys. Victor disappeared with Andrew the CFO and Todd the hedge fund manager, clearly trying to find some financial way out. I sat at the conference table, sipping water, remarkably calm. Philip approached me during the recess. I should have warned Victor, he said quietly. I knew about Section 3. Thomas used to joke about it every year at the executive retreat. He called it the Rose insurance policy. He said if the company ever got so big that it forgot how Rose built it, she deserved to be compensated for that betrayal. Why didn't you warn Victor? I asked. Philip's smile was sad. Because in the 3 years he's been here, he's dismantled everything Thomas built. Not just the profit sharing and the benefits, but the culture, the relationships, the sense that we were building something meaningful. I've watched good people leave or get forced out. I've watched our employee engagement scores plummet. I've watched the company I loved become just another soulless corporation optimizing for quarterly earnings. He paused. Maybe I wanted to see if you'd fight back. Maybe I was hoping someone still would. After an hour, Harrison called everyone back to the table. Victor looked like he'd aged 5 years. The board members looked grim. We've consulted with outside counsel, Harrison began. They confirm that Section 3 of your original contract is legally enforceable. We've also reviewed our financial position. While the company could technically afford the exit package, it would require significant restructuring and would likely impact our stock price. Shareholders would demand explanations. There would be media coverage. Lawsuits, potentially. So what are you proposing? I asked. We're proposing a compromise, Harrison said. We'll restore your bonus for this year only at the full calculated amount of $2.8 million. Going forward, you'll transition into an advisory role with reduced responsibilities. You'll maintain your current salary and bonus structure until you choose to retire, at which point you'll receive a standard retirement package, but not the Section 3 exit payment. I almost laughed. They were offering me my own earned bonus as if it were a gift, plus a ceremonial job that would slowly marginalize me until I quit out of boredom. And they expected me to give up the exit package that was my only leverage. No, I said simply. Victor's head snapped up. No, what do you mean no? We're giving you your bonus. We're letting you keep your salary. What more do you want? I want full terms, I said. Either restore my position, my authority, and my compensation structure exactly as they were, no advisory role, no reduced responsibilities, no transition to irrelevance, or acknowledge that you're constructively dismissing me and honor Section 3 in full. Those are the two options. That's blackmail, Victor hissed. That's a contract, I corrected. You wanted to run this company like a business? Fine, in business, contracts matter. You unilaterally changed mine. Now you're facing the consequences. Todd, the hedge fund manager, looked at Harrison. What happens if we just fire her for cause? Insubordination, failure to align with company direction, whatever. We'd still be in court for years, Philip said, and Rose's performance reviews are impeccable. I've reviewed every annual evaluation for 23 years. She's met or exceeded every target. We have no documented cause for termination. Any attempt to manufacture it now, especially immediately after this meeting, would be transparent retaliation. Claire Donovan spoke up. What if we pay the exit package, take the hit, move forward? The stock will recover. We can frame it as honoring a legacy commitment from the founder. That's $124 million, Victor said incredulously. For one person, do you know what we could do with that capital? The acquisitions we could make, the technology we could develop. Do you know what a lengthy legal battle would cost? Claire countered. Not just in legal fees, but in management distraction, employee morale, public perception. If this becomes a story about how we tried to cheat a loyal executive out of her earned compensation, what does that do to our recruiting? Our corporate reputation? The debate continued for another 2 hours. Various board members proposed different compromises. Some suggested paying me a fraction of the exit package to go away quietly. Others suggested phasing the payment over 10 years to minimize the immediate financial impact. One even suggested giving me the payment in company stock instead of cash, which would have left me exposed to market fluctuations. I rejected every proposal that didn't meet my 2 conditions: full restoration of my position and compensation or full payment of Section 3. No middle ground, no compromises. They'd made this binary when Victor threatened my job and canceled my bonus. Now they could live with the consequences. Finally, as the afternoon sun started to sink toward the horizon, Harrison called for a final board vote. All in favor of terminating Rose Callahan's employment and honoring the Section 3 exit package in full. 2 hands went up. Claire Donovan and one other member, a retired executive named Gregory Hamilton who'd worked with Thomas years ago. All in favor of fully restoring Rose Callahan's position, compensation, and authority to the status quo ante. 3 hands went up. Philip raised his hand from his position at the end of the table, even though he technically didn't have a vote. All in favor of continuing negotiations toward a compromise position. 7 hands went up, including Victor's and Harrison's. I stood up, gathering my folder. Then we're done here. You have 48 hours to decide between the 2 options I've outlined. After that, my attorney will file a constructive dismissal claim and will let the courts decide. Either way, the story will go public. The press will cover it. Your shareholders will ask questions, so you can control the narrative now, or you can lose control of it entirely. Your choice. I walked out of the conference room with my head high, rode the elevator down to the parking garage, and sat in my car for 10 minutes, shaking with adrenaline. Then I called Jack. How'd it go? He asked. I pulled Section 3, I said. They're in full panic mode. Good, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Come home, I'm making your favorite dinner and we're celebrating. The next 48 hours were surreal. My phone rang constantly with calls from board members, from Victor, from Philip, from external attorneys hired to find loopholes. I referred everyone to Hannah Ortiz and spent the time at home with Jack, taking long walks, sleeping better than I had in months. Hannah called me on the evening of the second day. They've made their decision, she said. Full Section 3 payment, $124 million, paid in 3 installments over 6 months for cash flow management. In exchange, you resign with a joint statement praising your legacy and framing the exit package as a celebration of your contributions during the company's growth. No admission of constructive dismissal. No legal liability. Clean break. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Victory, certainly, vindication, but also sadness that it had come to this, that the company I'd helped build had become a place where this kind of battle was necessary. They're also offering one additional term, Hannah continued. They want to announce the departure of Victor Ashford simultaneously with yours. Apparently, several board members have lost confidence in his leadership. They're framing it as a mutual decision to bring in new leadership, but between you and me, they're paying him to go away too. Not nearly as much as you, but enough. That surprised me. The board is forcing Victor out. Claire Donovan led the charge. She told Harrison that if the company had to pay you $124 million because of Victor's incompetence and arrogance, then Victor couldn't stay. Several other board members agreed. The stock price impact, the media coverage, someone had to take the fall. Victor made himself the obvious target. So I would get my exit package, Victor would be gone, and the company would have a chance to reset. It wasn't perfect. I'd rather have stayed and continued building the culture Thomas and I had created. But it was a form of justice. Accept the terms, I told Hannah. Draw up the paperwork. 1 week later, Apex Solutions issued a joint press release. Rose Callahan, Executive Vice President of Global Operations for 23 years, was retiring to spend more time with family. In recognition of her extraordinary contributions during the company's period of exponential growth, she was receiving a legacy compensation package negotiated during the company's founding era. Victor Ashford was stepping down to pursue other opportunities. The board was conducting a search for new leadership committed to balancing growth with the company's founding values. The business press covered it extensively. Most articles focused on the size of my exit package, with headlines ranging from "Executive receives $124 million golden parachute" to "Early contract clause pays off for longtime operations chief." A few reporters dug deeper, finding former employees willing to talk about the culture shift under Victor's leadership, about the layoffs and the eliminated benefits, and the loss of what had made Apex special. One article in particular, published in a major business magazine, framed the story differently. The Rose Callahan payout represents more than just a savvy contract negotiation, the reporter wrote. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when companies prioritize short-term financial engineering over long-term relationship building. Callahan's exit package was expensive precisely because she had made herself invaluable during the company's formative years. The question shareholders should ask is not whether she deserved the payout, but why current leadership had created conditions that triggered it. That article sparked discussions at business schools, in corporate boardrooms, in HR departments. I started getting calls from executives at other companies, asking about contract negotiation, about protecting yourself while protecting others, about standing up to hostile leadership. 3 months after my departure, I received an unexpected visitor. Philip, the general counsel, showed up at my house on a Saturday morning. Jack invited him in, offered coffee, then tactfully disappeared to give us privacy. I resigned, Philip told me, settling into our living room couch. 2 weeks ago. I should have done it years ago, when Victor started dismantling everything, but I told myself I could moderate his worst impulses from inside. I was wrong. What changed? I asked. You, Philip said simply. Watching you fight back, watching you refuse to accept the compromise positions, watching you hold firm on your principles, it reminded me that staying silent makes you complicit. The board has started course correcting. They brought in a new CEO, someone with actual operational experience. They're reinstating some of the programs Victor cut, but I couldn't stay. I'd enabled too much damage. We talked for 2 hours about regret, about integrity, about the cost of corporate careers. When Philip left, he shook my hand and said, "Thomas would have been proud of you. He always said you had steel in your spine." 6 months after my departure, I received the final installment of my exit package. $124 million, minus taxes, lawyers' fees, and various deductions. I sat with Jack at our kitchen table. The same table where we'd negotiated that original contract 23 years earlier, and looked at the final bank statement. We could buy a yacht, Jack joked, or a private island, or a small country. Or we could do something useful, I said. We established a foundation focused on worker retraining and support for employees displaced by corporate restructuring. We funded scholarship programs at state universities for first-generation college students. We made a major donation to my parents' hometown in Ohio, helping to revitalize the main street where their hardware store had stood for 40 years. We set up trust funds for our kids and future grandchildren. We took that trip to New Zealand. But the most satisfying part came a year after my departure. I was contacted by the new CEO of Apex Solutions, a woman named Angela Hartwell who'd built her career in operations at a competing firm. She asked to meet for lunch. "I wanted you to know what we're doing," Angela said, over salads at a downtown restaurant. "The board asked me to rebuild the culture, to go back to what made Apex great in the first place. I've been reviewing your old initiatives, talking to employees who remember how things used to be. We're bringing back profit sharing. We're reopening 2 of the domestic distribution centers. We're investing in training and development. And we're requiring every executive to spend time in the field, learning operations from the ground up." "That sounds like the company I remember," I said. "I also wanted to ask if you'd consider joining our advisory board," Angela continued. "Paid position, minimal time commitment, but your perspective would be invaluable as we rebuild. I know you fought hard to leave. I'm not asking you to come back full-time, but maybe a few hours a quarter, helping us get it right." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Yes," I said, "on one condition. I want to endow an employee assistance fund, completely separate from the company, that provides emergency financial support to workers facing hardship. No company approval required, no strings attached, just help when it's needed." "Done," Angela said, extending her hand. We shook on it. That was 2 years ago. Today, Apex Solutions has returned to growth, but different growth than Victor's vision. Sustainable growth, human growth, the kind that builds value without destroying culture. Employee satisfaction scores are climbing. Turnover has decreased. The stock price has actually improved as the market recognized the value of long-term thinking. I serve on 3 corporate boards now, always asking the uncomfortable questions, always pushing companies to remember that quarterly earnings matter less than lasting value. I speak at business schools about contract negotiation and standing up to hostile leadership. I mentor young executives, especially women, especially those who worry that being decent means being weak. And sometimes, late at night, I pull out that original contract, the one Jack and I drafted at our kitchen table when our kids were small, and $124 million was an absurd fantasy. I read Section 3 and remember Thomas Whitmore's laugh when he signed it. "If we hit 5 billion, you deserve every penny." We hit 6 billion. And yes, I deserved every penny. Not because of the money itself, but because of what it represented. A promise kept, a contract honored, and the idea that loyalty and integrity can still triumph over arrogance and greed. The truth is, they didn't cancel my bonus. They tried. They assumed I'd accept whatever terms they dictated because that's what usually happens. Executive leadership changes, old guard gets pushed out, everyone pretends it's mutual and takes their modest severance and fades away. But I had something they'd forgotten: leverage, protection. A contract signed in good faith by a man who valued people over profits. When Victor said, "Zero bonus, deal with it," he thought he held all the cards. When I said pull Section 3, the entire game changed. The auditors froze because the numbers were real. The shareholders called emergency meetings because a $124 million payout demands explanation. And in the end, I got full terms. Not a compromise, not a fraction. Full terms. Because some battles aren't about money. They're about proving that words mean something, that contracts matter, that you can't just rewrite history because it's convenient. They're about standing up when standing up is hard, when everyone expects you to sit down and be quiet, when the path of least resistance is to take what's offered and disappear. I didn't disappear, I fought, and I won, not just for me, but for every employee who'd been laid off, every program that had been cut, every promise that had been broken. My payout was expensive, but it sent a message. There are still consequences for treating people as disposable. So here's what I learned from 23 years in corporate America and one spectacular exit. Negotiate your contracts when you have leverage, not after you need it. Build relationships before you need them. Document everything. Know your worth. And never, ever assume that powerful people will do the right thing simply because it's right. They'll do it when not doing it costs them something. In my case, it cost them $124 million, worth every penny. If you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for, someone who believes that standing up to injustice matters, even when it's risky. Hit that subscribe button and help us reach 8,000 subscribers. Share these stories with people who need to know they're not alone in fighting corporate battles. And remember, your value isn't determined by how they treat you. It's determined by what you're willing to accept. Don't settle for less than full terms. Thank you so much for reaching out and sharing this with us. We truly appreciate you taking the time to connect, as your feedback and support help us continuously improve.